I'm Phil Lichtenberger. Welcome to Scanner School session number 21.
Welcome to the Scanner School, a podcast dedicated to the scanner radio hobby. Class is about to begin. Here is your host, Phil Lichtenberger.
So welcome to Scanner School. My name is Phil Lichtenberger. My amateur radio call sign is W2LIE. And today we are talking with Jim Peruta. Jim is a 45-year veteran of the Fire Buff Photography group or club or whatever it is you want to call it. He's in that hobby. And basically what Jim does is he goes out and he takes pictures of fire scenes, fire apparatus. He's in with the fire community, but not as a member or a volunteer, but as a volunteer fire photographer. Jim tells his story, the things he's learned over the last 45 years in the following interview. Now, Jim is a member of the Connecticut Fire Photographers Association, and he also runs his own website at res23cue.net, which is really Rescue 23. We'll have a bunch of links to the stuff that we're talking about in this interview at scannerschool.com/session21. There's a lot of links and a lot of other groups and memberships that Jim and I talk about. So instead of piling them all in the middle of the interview, we're just going to have them as session notes that belong with this podcast. So another thing that we need to keep in the back of our minds, though, when we listen to this interview is that this interview was done just 1 month after I started the Scanner School podcast. I started this January 2nd, 2018, and this interview was recorded February 3rd, 2018. So you can kind of hear that, it's a little bit embarrassing, right? I'm really not 100% behind the microphone, not how I sound now, and I'm sure 20 episodes from now I'll sound even that much better. But just going back and listening to the way I sound, let me just apologize to how stiff and how different it sounds. And sitting here listening to this podcast now or that interview 3 months later, I'm kind of I'm kind of cringing in my chair over here behind the microphone. But again, I want to thank Jim for being my very first interview guest on the Scanner School podcast, even though he wasn't the first interviewed to have been played on the podcast. We definitely had a couple more people on ahead of him. I wanted to table his interview because I wanted to play it when it made sense. And now last week we had talked about fire pagers and fire tone outs and that kind of stuff. So I felt like this was a really good opportunity to follow that up with Jim's interview. Now again, Jim talks about all the ways that he's gotten involved with the fire service from the photography standpoint, the equipment that he uses, and he is full of advice for anybody who's looking to do this. Now, again, this is something I brought on here because I think that it's another element that goes along with the scanning, right? We all kind of like enjoy listening to the scanners. Maybe listening to fire and police isn't your thing. Maybe you enjoy listening to air traffic or marine or whatever else, but going out, leaving the desk or leaving the radio or getting out there brings another element to scanning. So you might be able to sit back well behind the fire line, listen to the action, and see it played out as a spectator. Brings another element to the hobby of scanning, though Jim takes it one step further with the photography, which is always cool too. But just got to remember, you stay out of the way, stay safe, don't get in anybody's way, don't cause any trouble. Again, you are there, as a spectator, and that's really what the goal here is. The goal here isn't to promote the fire photography service as a way to kind of get in the way or get yourself or anybody else into trouble. It's just it's something that we discuss as to how to be there and really bring something into the fire community by being a fire photographer. So again, if you have any any need for any links that are here, I really strongly suggest going to scannerschool.com/session21. Again, there'll be links to Jim's site, which is res23cue.net, and also the Connecticut Fire Photographers Association website as well. So that's it for me for now. Let's go ahead and listen to the interview that I did with Jim Peruta. Okay, we want to welcome Jim Peruta to the Scanner School podcast. Jim, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's a great day. A little chilly, but sun's out. That's all that matters.
Exactly. I guess Jim is East Coast U.S. like I am. He's from Connecticut, so just the other side of the Long Island Sound for me. So, Jim, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, Phil, I started out listening to the Scanners when I was probably 10 years old. A long time ago, my brother was a policeman in town. And boy, we had this little box that would go behind the AM radio, and you would be able to receive the police calls through the radio. Then we moved on, and I moved up, and we had crystal-controlled scanners. Then we went into the digital scanners. And, now we have the more complex P25 systems. It's real interesting. And in that time, I became a fire buff, running out to fires and watching the firemen. I had a different older brother that was a volunteer fireman here in town. And I got the bug. I went around taking pictures of fire scenes and hanging around firehouses, and I've traveled all over the country, meeting and greeting people and taking pictures. It's been a great run, and I look to do it for a lot longer.
Okay, very good. So you said you listen to a couple of scanners now, and what type of scanners do you have in your setup right now? What do you typically listen to, either at home or while you're actually out there shooting your photos?
Okay, I have a Uniden BCD 325 P2 pocket scanner, and then I have on my desk here a BCT 15X. Sorry, I have to look at them. And what else I use? I use a desktop program called Radiolog. It's since been discontinued, but what it does is it takes all the radio reference feeds and puts them into a program of tiles that you could turn on and off and move around. It's really a great system. You have to have a serial number and all that for it. So I'm kind of sad that when I finally have to trade this computer in, I'm not going to be able to listen to it anymore. And then the last thing I do is I have Zello. It's a push-to-talk walkie-talkie app on my phone. And members of my Connecticut Fire Photographers Association have a few channels on there. And we all monitor the radio. And when a fire comes in, we get on that Zello app and we talk. We trade photographs. We give details. If somebody is responding to the scene, they give reports. It's truly a great asset and tool. There's many other groups around the country that are using it too, fire buff groups. I was listening this morning. There was 2 separate fires. There's a fire in Newark in 3 buildings, and I was able to listen to the updates and see pictures live from the scene. And then also in Roselle, New Jersey, they had an apartment building burning, and listening to the updates on that and getting pictures. It's just the greatest thing since sliced bread. Starting out over 40 years ago, listening to a scanner and being able to hear local stuff, and now we can hear stuff all around the country. And that's what I use. I also have a two-way radio that I'm a member of some local fire clubs. Use the UHF band on a business channel, and we have conversations on that as well as the Zello.
So you have multiple things going at the same time. So basically you're saying you listen to a couple of scanners at one time, or you listen to just the Zello, or do you trade off, or how do you keep tabs of what's going on, everything at once?
Sometimes, my wife doesn't necessarily like that all the time. I have a pocket scanner that I carry around pretty religiously. Then it's the Zello app if I'm not near the scanner or using the scanner. And then the last thing is the two-way radio. But what's very helpful, though, is radio reference when you're listening to the distant stations that you can't get on the scanner, such as major cities as Jersey City or Boston or New York City. So I'm always in touch one way or another. On the nightstand, I have an old iPod and one of those home amplifier things, and I keep the Hartford Fire Department on that 24 hours a day because I'm one of the volunteer fire department or volunteer photographers for the city of Hartford. So if there's a call that's worth going to, I able to hear that and get right up and go.
All right, excellent. So it sounds like you have enough going on in the background where you're at. So basically, I guess what you do is you hear a call come over the radio one way or another, either through Zello or through your own local handheld or portable you have sitting around with you. And then how do you decide if it's something that you're going to grab the camera gear and head out? Is there something you listen for specifically on the radio, or do you run for every call, or how do you normally pick and choose what you're going to go out and buff out?
No, it's pretty much you have to pick and choose because if a lot of times calls sound interesting when the dispatch is initially made, but they end up being nothing. So pretty much, I'll wait to the first arriving apparatus or officer gets to the scene. But sometimes you can get tipped off by a good dispatcher, especially, when I listen to the city of Hartford, I can tell what section of the city is, what time of day is, if they get smoke in the building around dinner time or breakfast time, it could always be just the food on the stove situation. But sometimes you could hear it in the dispatcher's voice. And, and if they're really good, they'll tell you they're getting multiple calls. I get right up for that and start going. Sometimes it turns out to be nothing. But, if you don't go initially, these guys are really good. They put the fire out before you get there.
Right. Now, do you have certain time limits that you normally go out for, or are you like one of those, you're always ready, you always got the bag next to you, and it doesn't matter if it's 3 a.m. or 3 in the afternoon?
Yeah, I've been doing this for 45 plus years. I go anytime, any day, anytime, day or night, weekend or whatever, unless I have a commitment to go to, work or family obligations. But, I'll go pretty much at a drop of a hat.
Very interesting. That sounds like an interesting line of work. Now, you do this professionally, or is this a hobby turn kind of side gig for you?
It's a hobby turned obsession.
That's a good way of putting it. Now, if somebody is looking to get into this as maybe starting as a hobby, then maybe turn this into a little bit of a side income for them, what would you recommend that they start off with as far as equipment goes?
Well, first of all, if you're going to try and do it as a income, it's not going to work. There's just not enough fires or those types of things to sell your wares, so to speak. What you would do it for more is as a hobby and for name recognition. What you need to do is first, get out and meet the firemen. Okay, maybe stop by the firehouse, say hello. Always show up with a coffee cake or donuts or something. They love that. And just get a feel. Another way to do it is if you belong to or you're in a small town that has a volunteer fire department, find out when their drill night is. Stop by and offer to take a picture of some of the guys. Their fire trucks. Firemen are, a bunch of hams. They love to have their picture taken. As far as going to fire scenes, you have to be very careful. The police department is pretty much charged with scene safety now, and they try and keep the general bystanders back. So obey the police. Sometimes you can walk around on the sidewalk and they won't bother you. But if the cops tell you to move back, don't give them any discussion. Listen to what they have to say, and then later on, talk to the fire chief. Sometimes they'll give you a wink and a nod and tell you to come over the fire line, or in my situation, a number of departments, I have a fire line pass. I just show it to the cop and I can move on through. But that's through a lot of trust and a long time relationship.
So you're talking several years, if not longer than that, basically, to get that trust from somebody who's not a volunteer who wants to be in there and take photos.
Exactly, because the police, they don't always check with the fire chief and say, hey, is it okay for this guy to go down there? No, they don't want to hear it. They're just move on back. They don't want you getting hurt, and they don't want to have to write a report out why you got hurt. So, it's something that you have to slowly ease your way into. If you go out and you take pictures, stop by the firehouse and offer them some pictures, okay? Or find out who to email them to and email them to them. Or email them a link and tell them, let me know which pictures you want and I'll let you have them. It's when it's a hobby, it's all about sharing with everybody.
Right. That's good advice. So basically what you're saying is get in there, introduce yourself, spend time, buttering them up basically with the coffee and the donuts and the coffee cake and that kind of stuff, and build a relationship and build the trust with the departments that you want to capture in action. And then this way they'll know you and you'll know them, and it'll be a little bit more of a bond than just an outsider who wants to be in there and take some photos and move on. So
exactly, and follow through. If you say you're going to do something, do it, and just don't be a Johnny come lately. Get the pictures and leave. Also, when you're taking the pictures, be very careful. Try and show the firefighters in a good light. If they're doing something that's wrong, don't publish the picture. If they don't have their gloves or helmet on or eye protection or something like that, look them over real good. Take your eye and go all around the photograph. And if somebody's doing something wrong, don't publish it. Keep it for yourself, but be careful to only give them what's proper.
Right, and sometimes I would assume too that maybe the fire departments may not want those out publicly, but maybe they may want them internally as a learning tool. Exactly what you said. Maybe they put it in a book and say, find out what's wrong with this picture, and they could use that as an example internally as well. I mean,
yeah. And while I'm on that point, another thing is be very sensitive of victims. Start waving a camera around at a car accident or something when somebody's hurt. Some people are going to start getting upset. Never take pictures of victims. And if you ever publish, again, I very rarely do a car accident, but if I do, I obscure the marker plates. You don't want to, give anybody ammunition to drag you into court or be mad at you.
That's some good advice right there. So as far as the pictures themselves, which pictures do you always find out become your most popular or your most requested type, or maybe the most downloaded pictures that you have on your website?
Well, what's really crazy is people love shiny red fire trucks. Our organization, we have about 80 people. We have a website. If you want to go to the website, you can go to ctfirephoto.org. Again, that's CT, like Connecticut, ctfirephoto.org. And also, you could follow us on Facebook, Twitter. I think we have Instagram. I'm not sure. But you can check all the social medias out. But we have a guy that keeps track of all the social media. And for some reason, if there's a nice fire truck picture, that's the most liked. Believe it or not.
Excellent. That's always good to know. So maybe it's not even like get down there and take pictures of the fire scene, but maybe go down while they're doing a wash down on a Sunday or something like that when they're cleaning the trucks. And that's even a good way of maybe gaining the trust of the fire department that you want to build a relationship with as well. I mean, even some in-house stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, go, if it's a volunteer fire department, go down and offer, say, hey, you're doing some training or something, you need me to take some pictures for you? I'd love to do it for you.
Great, that's a great way to do it. So as far as like you've taken the pictures and you're back now from whatever it was the event, what's your next process in the step of getting them off the camera and onto a online platform? What are your next steps?
Okay, well, what I do is I have a whole checklist. When I go out to a fire scene and take pictures, I probably spend 45 minutes to an hour, just maybe even sometimes longer, depending upon how many pictures I take, just going through the steps of cataloging the pictures, editing them as far as, darkness and sharpness and stuff like that. Then I upload them to my website, okay, which is res23cue.net. And then from there, I start sharing the pictures on social media. I have a Facebook page. You can look for it. Most of my stuff is just res23cue. So I share it on Facebook, Twitter, and then I dole out some pictures onto Instagram. And then from there, I upload it to the association's website. Then I send the pictures to the individual department. And then I also publish a lot of photographs in the Fire News newspaper. And you can look that up, Fire News. It's originating out there in Long Island. I don't know what their website is. I think it's firenews.com. So it takes a while. Sometimes I'll do it over a number of days, but it's an hour, 2 hours sometimes.
And that's per per
per
time you go out there. So that's a lot of
per-
work. It really is a hobby. And I guess you touched them up. You said too, you use Photoshop or something like that to just color correct them, or you just run through them real quick and basically you do all you take in the way they come from the camera, or what do you do typically for that?
Well, I use Lightroom, and that's what I do. I crop, I lighten, darken, put some noise reduction in it. I do a lot of night photography. Most fires I go to are at night, and I use a tripod with no flash. So there's a lot of color correction and exposure correction, and you'll also see that I love to use a fisheye lens because I like being known as the wide guy. I like to take the overall scene at the fire, where the fire trucks are parked, the operations type of thing. And then you can take some buddy shots at the end and when they're picking up and stuff. But it's pretty varied. And occasionally I'll go out and take a picture of a shiny red fire truck.
Yeah, I noticed. I was through your website a couple of days ago, and those were the pictures that immediately grabbed my attention. Or were the wide angle or even the fisheye ones. You had one, I think, of the corner of the fire truck, and that was a fisheye shot. But to me, I agree. Those wide angle shots are really the ones that they show more than really the eye can see. It basically is what when you go there. So they're always very stunning to look for. So when you go out there, what type of equipment are you shooting with?
I have a Nikon D7000 camera. I have the fisheye lens. I have a wide angle zoom lens, and then I have a more of a 70 to 200 lens also, and a tripod. Very rarely do I use flash because you have a lot of problems, especially at nighttime when using a electronic flash. It reflects off all the scotch light and the reflective trim on the fire trucks and bounces back and gives you a lot of ghosting. Some people use the flash. They're very good at it. I'm not. I like to use the tripod. Sometimes you have to use a slow speed and you get a little ghosting of the people. But I've really enjoyed using the tripod. It makes me slow down a little bit. Occasionally I'll turn on the video on the camera. I have a GoPro attached to the camera. Right now, we don't record video at the Hartford Fire Department on the scenes. We've been asked not to. So if I go out to another fire somewhere else, I'll turn on the video and get some clips that way.
That's very good. That's very interesting. So I guess do you carry a fallback camera with you, or just the one body, and do you swap lenses on the scene, or how do you normally do that? Because you're running with a DSLR.
Yeah, I have just the one DSLR and swap out lenses. Someday I'm going to save up some money and buy a second body, but I also have my second camera, which is the cell phone, which is very interesting. You can get some really great shots with low light with the cell phone. And also it's the immediate for posting those pictures on the Zello app, on Twitter, Facebook. And it's really neat to be out at 2 o'clock in the morning and do a little live video on Periscope or on Facebook, or throw up a couple of pictures. It really gains some interest when people wake up in the morning and see there was a fire somewhere.
Very interesting. So you're actually putting live video up on Periscope too. So you're using a lot of apps. I mean, I've counted here. You got the Zello, you've got Periscope, then you've got your Facebook, your Instagram. I think you said you had Twitter on there as well. Plus you have your website. So in your group's website. So you got 6 or 7 different avenues that you're distributing your photos through.
Yeah, and when you go to my website, when you go to see the pictures, the pictures are all hosted on Flickr.
Flickr, okay.
No, Flickr.
Oh, Flickr, Flickr. Okay, so you're not using anything that somebody can go to, like Shutter. What's the other one they use that here? Shutter.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. There's SmugMug, Shutterfly,
yes.
All those. But I've used Flickr for a long time now, and that's a free website for hosting your pictures, and it's got a great community there. You can look at a lot of fire pictures on that.
Okay, so for somebody who's starting out or who has an interest in pursuing this part of the hobby, because this kind of ties in. First, you start off with the scanner and you're listening to what's going on there, and you kind of taking what you're listening to and going out there and associating the photography side to it, which is a huge hobby on its own. For somebody who has basically just a radio and maybe their cell phone, what would be a good way for somebody to start? Do you recommend them getting a cheap body DSLR, or can they go out there and just start putting a photo gallery together on Flickr or on their own website, just using what they have in their pocket right now.
The old cliche, whatever camera you have with you is the best camera you got. Don't go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a camera when you're first starting. Use whatever point and shoot camera you have, whatever DSLR you might have. Don't buy an expensive one to start. Work into it. See if you really like it, because it's a big commitment. I started out 45 years ago with film cameras, shooting slide film. And I had two at that time, one with all black and white film in it and the other one with color slide film. So I've evolved a little bit. I go on the digital route. I had a cheap Kodak camera for a while when they first came out. And then I upgraded to that Nikon D7000, which is, let's see here, 6 years old now. It's time to buy another body, and I'll just keep that for a spare. But just use whatever you got and just go out and practice and take some pictures.
That's right. Practice makes perfect. And it doesn't have to be the fire photography that makes you practice. It could be anything that, gets you to pick up the camera and start shooting. I know as an amateur photographer myself, I mean, it was when I first got started, it was, anything in the corner just to get used to the dials and getting out of program mode and into aperture priority or shutter priority and playing with the white balances. There's a lot that goes on. And when you're excited and the adrenaline's pumping and you're at the fire scene, that, that's not the time to learn the camera for sure.
How many times when I was a lot younger, you open up or start rewinding the roll of film and realized it never hooked on the spool, and you took 20 pictures and the film never advanced.
It's one of those moments where you can actually feel your heart sink into your feet, right?
Oh, or you didn't have the flash synced right, or you had the wrong aperture and they all came out black. Oh, there was a lot of that in the early days. Digital photography for fire photography has really been a game changer. And also the ability to share it immediately. Before, when you shot a roll of slide film, you'd have to wait a week. Okay. Now you're taking a picture on your phone and you're sharing it with the whole world in seconds, or you're looking at Flickr or I take that back. I'm sorry, Periscope. You watch it while it happens. You're living from your computer now.
Yeah, it's amazing how much technology has made this whole thing. It's a whole nother animal now, thanks to technology.
Yeah, let's face it. The computer and the cell phone have killed the fire buff, so to speak. There was people that would hang around firehouses just to be friends with the firemen. They don't have to do that anymore, because all this is being transmitted from the fire scene. They don't have to go to the fires anymore. They could just sit back in their lounge chair and watch it happen through somebody else. Right.
And again, that takes you right back to what you talked about in the beginning. If you want to build that personal relationship with the fire department, and it's good to go there and show your face and be a body. I mean, they may ask you to volunteer, and to join, and that wouldn't be a bad thing either. So, it pays to get there and build that trust and the that kind of relationship with them.
That's right.
Excellent. So, any other items that you want to wisdom or anything like that through the years that you've gained that you'd like to share with the audience?
Like I said, go slow, practice, decide if you really want to do it, and then go into it, all in. Don't be a pest. Learn your place, so to speak. Get to know the guys, see them, outside of the fire scene. See them at the firehouse. There's always fire buff groups to join some places. You can look at the International Fire Buffs Association. That's ifba.org, I believe. They're a great group, and you can see where all the groups are through the country. Look around. You might find some other people on the fire scene and hook up with them and create your own group. It's all about, if you have an interest, and your podcast here is all about scanner groups and listening to scanners and stuff. Maybe a bunch of guys that listen to the scanner want to get together and do a little tour of the fire department, the police department, and the ambulance and stuff. Get out there and do something.
Exactly. Good advice. And then before we go, is there anything else that you'd like to put a plug in for, or any other website, or your website again, or anything like that?
Well, just, look at the Connecticut Fire Photographers website, ctfirephoto.org, and you'll see all the guys there. Like I said, we got 80 members. There's a lot of great pictures there. Look for us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Zello channels. It's a great thing. It's a great hobby.
Excellent. And your website, one more time, would be?
It's res23cue.net. Rescue 23 with the 23 in the middle, .net.
Excellent, Jim. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Hopefully this has brought some interest into another part of the scanning hobby to somebody else who was either looking at photos already, or had an interest, or now may decide to take in something firsthand, and maybe again too, it may be somebody who's, like you said, never thought about going to a firehouse and actually building that relationship. Real quick too, is there any other ways that somebody can build a relationship with the fire department? You said before, when they're out there doing their, the washing of the trucks or having an event. I mean, what kind of events that are not rescue situations maybe could a photographer go to that would help them build a relationship with the fire department?
Well, a lot of fire departments have parades. You go to the parades and meet the guys. Generally, they congregate a little bit at the end. There's other things where they have photo shoots, gatherings, musters. In the big cities and career departments, they have public displays. Sometimes open houses. Look around and write the dates down and make it a point to go.
Excellent. Good advice. Jim, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
All right, Phil, thank you very much for having me. And if anybody does want to contact me, they can do it through Facebook or the Twitter or whatever. I'm more than happy to answer more questions, or go to the Scanner School Facebook page and meet me there.
Sounds good. Thank you. And the link for that would be scannerschool.com/Facebook group. Jim, thank you so much again for being here today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks. All right. Hopefully you guys weren't cringing too much at that interview with the questions that I was asking or how I sounded behind the mic. But again, I want to thank Jim for being my first guest on the Scanner School podcast. I really appreciate that. And I also want to open up the invitation to anybody else. If there's something that you enjoy doing with scanning, please drop me a line. I would love to have you as a guest. Share your story. I'm sure other people would like to hear what you do with your scanners too, because again, this is, it's Scanner School. It's not just me as a teaching you. It's one of those environments too where everybody can learn from everybody. So I invite you to, raise your hand, send me an email, send me a tweet, send me something on Facebook, and let me know that there's something out there that you would like to share with the rest of the Scanner School audience. Are you a rail fan? Do you enjoy listening to marine, aviation, whatever it is that you do with the scanner? I mean, it might just be something that, police and fire, but if it's something unique that you do that you think that the rest of the group would find interesting, please drop me a line. I have a couple of interviews lined up. I have a couple more that are already in the bag that will be releasing as the schedule permits, so to say. So again, if you want to be a special guest on the podcast, drop me a line. Twitter, Facebook, or my email address, Phil, that's PHIL, @scannerschool.com, or just go to the webpage at scannerschool.com and fill out the contact form. And while you're on the website, you can sign up for our email list. So again, I want to thank you all for joining Scanner School. We teach you everything that there is to know about the scanner radio hobby. And again, I want to just put this out there real quick that you can help support the Scanner School podcast by becoming a Patreon supporter. So if you go to scannerschool.com/Patreon or scannerschool.com/support, which is probably the easier one to remember, again, scannerschool.com/support, there'll be a link to our Patreon link where you can make a monthly pledge, something as little as $1 a month if that's all you feel comfortable with. But we do have special tiers, and the higher that you go with the tiers, which was, the more that you pledge, the more benefits open up to you. So like one of the benefits are you get the podcast earlier than the general public. You get special videos that are only available to the Patreon supporters. You would get we have mugs and shirts and whatnot that we give out at a higher tier level, and then at the highest tier level we have Basically, you have me on retainer where you can ask me questions 30 minutes a month on anything you have related to scanning. So again, if you don't want to give a financial donation to Scanner School, you can always go to scannerschool.com/support, where we have affiliate products. So if you're a big Amazon shopper, as I am, you can use our Amazon link and then make a purchase, and we'll get credit for the sale that way as well. So that's a great way. If you're already going to shop on Amazon, it doesn't cost you anything to help support the Scanner School podcast. So with that, I'm going to say 73. We will see you next week on Tuesday, unless you're a Patreon supporter. We'll see you earlier than that. My name is Phil Lichtenberger. My amateur radio call sign is W2LIE. And again, thank you for joining the Scanner School podcast, where we teach you everything that you need to know about the scanner radio hobby.
Thanks for listening to the Scanner School podcast. Be sure to visit www.scannerschool.com to access the show notes and bonus content.